We are now moving on from news. We are going into our next section, which is Roast My Deck.
I'm waiting for the like, where's the little sound effects?
We're going to go through one deck for this podcast episode. I wanted to show one deck which I thought was a little higher quality than the last time we ran through them. But obviously here you've barely seen this one.
I don't think I've seen it at all.
Yeah, so we're going to go through and do a live react, and I'll give my thoughts, but we'll go through here. We'll skip the title slide and jump straight into slide 2.
So I want to go back to the title slide briefly because
Okay, we can go back to the title slide. We'll go back to the title slide. And sorry, just so everyone who is listening, this is a company called CarbonHQ, and the tagline is digital infrastructure for the global carbon credit industry.
The principle here is that we are sharing kind of the raw thoughts and feedback as we roll through. And obviously the founding team has opted into us doing that in public, but the intent here is to see and understand what VCs think about as they roll through these decks.
Correct. That's right. Thank you.
So I think you give it, again, nice first slide. I like the design aspect of this. You're like, oh, someone's put effort into design. My first piece here, though, is to say digital infrastructure of the global carbon credit industry. And I go, I've seen 50 of these. I've seen 50 of these and doesn't yet tell me what this team is going to do different. I get that it says what they're aiming to do, or at least to some degree what they're aiming to do. But on the VC side, you've seen tons and tons of these like carbon credit, carbon accounting, everything else pitches recently. And so I think if I was pitching this, I would want to make it clear from this very first point what it was that I was doing different to literally every other one that the VCs read.
Okay, cool.
I'm
going to move on to slide 2.
I like it.
There. It's a team slide. You got the 2 co-founders. It's actually very well designed. I've got to say, the kudos to the design. I quite like it.
I'm not sure I like the hi there style, but again, that's a bit of a religion point. You could just call it team. I like the piece. I like the piece of the way that it very clearly and quickly communicates that this is a team where one person has the industry-specific knowledge, the other has built software.
Yeah.
And I like that. Nice, clean, simple, cool. We've got a standard co-founding team of someone who has deep industry experience or industry perspective, whatever, the business person, quote unquote, and the tech person. I like that. Nice, simple.
Yeah, I agree. All I would make highlight here is for a lot of the pre-seed founders we get, it's very hard sometimes to work out who is on your engineering team. They hide it, or sometimes they don't talk about it, or sometimes just talk about one of the co-founders. Make sure to talk about who leads up your engineering. And the other aspect is if you don't have anyone that are doing some of the functions, but you have someone ready to go, it is fine to put them on the deck and be like, this is the person that's joining us after.
To hire, or joining post round, or whatever it is you want to do.
Correct. Much better to do that than just to leave them off completely and look like there's no one on the team. Okay, next slide 3. It says, we are losing the fight against climate change. It's crucial that we decarbonize what we can use and use carbon projects to offset what we can't.
Yeah, look, any company in this space can put this on their deck. And if the VC reading your deck doesn't believe in climate change, they won't invest in your company. So it's like, don't just put these, from my view, don't just put these sort of like hand waving, oh yes, we all agree with this in principle, because it's like, yeah, we all agree with this in principle. If I believed that climate change didn't exist, I wouldn't be investing in climate companies. And you wouldn't want me as an investor either. But you don't then need to say, oh yes, climate change, important. I'm like, yeah, no shit, of course it's important.
All right, I'm going to skip this one and go to slide 4 then. Slide 4.
Sure. I think this has too much complexity already.
I think that what I'd love is slide 3 to actually be more of an introduction to his problem and less of a climate change is important slide. And this one kind of just dives into the detail without really saying much.
Yeah. You look at the slide and you go, yeah, cool. Voluntary carbon market, it's gone 4x and then it's going to go 5x in 8 years. And I go, it's not necessarily like J-curve, but whatever. Sure.
Yeah. A good trick that we've been using with our founders is if you have a slide that is very complicated, ask yourself, what is the one key message you want someone to take away? And if it is not entirely obvious within a glance of a slide, then it is too complicated and you need to reword or re-emphasize something.
I think you could take any one of these 3 metrics and put it on a graph and call it done.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree.
And if people wanted to get more detail, then they can get more detail.
Yeah. Okay, next slide, 5. But carbon projects are currently buried in Excel, email, and PDFs. Okay. Now we're getting into the problem that he is addressing as opposed to setting up the problem, the market.
Yeah. I don't like this one.
How come?
It makes it feel a little bit too much like you're building a productivity suite. I think, again, it's a bit wishy-washy, and I think there are better ways of saying, because I go, is this trying to say the problem is these people in all these different roles find it hard to collaborate? Is it the problem that these people in these different roles don't know the data that the other people have? Is it the problem that everyone knows all of the data and everything else, but it's just not nicely collated and displayed? And all of those things are different sets of problems. And so I'm like, okay, carbon projects, of course, carbon projects are in email.
What isn't in email?
Yeah.
Like, is the problem I have with these types of statements is, is the solution then we never use email again? Well, and obviously that's not right.
Again, like the big piece here is like, sure, carbon accounting, big space or emerging space, and currently it's all in Excel. But that doesn't necessarily say why it needs to not be in Excel. There are lots of things in very late stage in finance that are still in Excel. You do a bond offering, Excel's going to be in there.
If you run a bank, it's an Excel spreadsheet that you have to submit, right?
Well, yes, but I think it's not every time we swipe our MasterCard, it's going back into some giant Excel document doing double entry accounting, James.
You never know. Somewhere, someone's checking it.
That's what mainframes are for. It's actually just really big Microsoft Excel documents.
That's right, yeah, that's right. Slide 6. And this is holding back the carbon industry. Is Excel holding back the carbon industry?
Yeah, I'm not trying to. I agree in the sense of I'm like, okay, like but part of me is look like this is the story of every nascent industry, right? It's not very efficient. It's consultants eating a thing of chips outside a fish and chip shop, like there's seagulls, and there's varying degrees of quality. Like you could say exactly the same thing about Bitcoin. So they're saying about cryptocurrency. Like every emerging segment has this period where it's not clear who's good and who's bad. It's not very efficient. There are consultants and scam artists all through this place. And I'm like, yeah, sure. Yeah, I don't know if it's software that's keeping that back or the fact that it's stuck in email and Excel. I'm like, not sure of that.
I would say for this founder, I think the problem here is not Excel. The problem here is what you're trying to get to, I think, is integrity of carbon project.
I would say professionalization.
I think that's a different problem than just simply going, I've got a lot of emails.
Yeah.
Meet CarbonHQ, the simplified way. So we are at the solution slide. An integrated platform for carbon projects. I don't know what that means.
It may as well have been the first slide, if you ask me.
Yeah, that's right. Also, I have an aversion to anyone that says an integrated platform because it says to me that you have no idea what it should be.
Yeah, I don't know. Whatever. Integrated platform. Who has disparate platforms?
Slide 8. Developers get unparalleled developers in the carbon project sense. Not
carbon project developers, not software developers.
Yeah. Unparalleled clarity across project lifestyle.
So at this point, I'm saying to myself, so are they building like a project management marketplace? Is that what they're building? Is this like a project management thing? Is how they're going to acquire the developers on one side and then have the sort of carbon accounting on the other? I'm not sure. It's not really clear to me if it's is this. Maybe I'll find out in the next slide perhaps. But like at this point, I'm going, okay, cool. So they've built like project management-y stuff for carbon credit developers. But like we've also just been talking about the organizations that have too many emails.
Yes, correct. Slide 9. Which spreads their organizations they work with. Okay, I think we're getting into the meat of the solution here.
This now just says to me, okay, so what the problem is here is that we just need a better way to be able to do standardized data reporting into standards bodies, regulators, buyers, investors.
I think so. Cool. That's my interpretation. Which again comes back to my whole integrity problem, which is different to an integrated platform problem.
Yeah, and this is also where I'm like, so who is like the buyer and the end user here, right? Is the buyer and the end user the developer who is like doing this in order to improve the integrity of the results and acquire a better buyer or a better value for the investment or whatever that they're selling? Or is the user here actually like buyer or investor, and then we're like working our way back, and the developer is in that sort of supply chain as a way to be able to improve that buying experience. I don't know. It doesn't really say much of that.
Potentially. Slide 10. And taking the carbon industry into the future.
Again, I'm like, great. Nascent industry is going to become more professional.
Yeah. This is the same slide as I think a few slides ago anyway, with just a different heading title. So I'm not too sure.
I get that they're trying to do the opposite and go, oh, look, it's a before and after, but I don't know. I think
it's a week before and after.
Same comments of the previous slide apply to this slide.
Yeah. Okay, journey slide 11.
Met, born, prototype, project. Okay, so you've said interviewed 40 project developers. So this is for a project developer. Okay. I assume.
Yeah, I think the biggest criticism here is I still don't know who the buyer is. And I should know by slide 11.
Yeah. But I guess the buyer are the people who are presumably carbon developers.
I presume I don't really know what carbon developers look like, all their names.
I think the second part for me is also help me understand the size of these things. Like I think in a nascent and emerging market like this, give me a bit of intel. It could be in an appendix if you want to have it in an appendix and put a footnote saying more information on the marketing appendix. That's fine. Yeah. But give me some more intel about, okay, so if the market is project developers of carbon projects, help me understand about how that market stacks out. Like what is big in that market? What is middle? What is little? Where are they globally? How much of it is like a winner-take-all piece? How much of it is like a mum and dad job? Help me understand a little bit of that, 1 or 2 slides, before you then say, okay, so here's who we're we're going into this market, mid-market. We're going into this market, enterprise end. We're going into this market, SME end. I don't know the answer to that because I don't.
Yeah, I agree. I think founders often have a struggle to tell us how they segment the market and what's a big and small company and what the definitions are. A really quick way to do it, if you don't know how to do it, is just to put employee size.
Yeah.
That's a really easy way to do it if there's no segments that exist yet, if it's a new market. But that's one way. Okay, slide 12. You were going to say something?
I was going to say, now look, some people will obviously know, in which case, great, they can flick over those slides. Like, I think that's where either put in an appendix, and if I was pitching this to a specialist carbon environmental impact type fund, I might consider putting that in an appendix. And for a more general fund, I might put that in the deck. Right, so you can actually tailor that a little bit insofar as you don't necessarily want to go to an investor who's invested in 10 carbon capture project management tools and say, let me tell you about the market, because they're going to go, oh, yeah, I know about the market, I'm not stupid. But for those of us that don't know about the market, we're not specialists in it, give us a bit of that color and flavor so that we can understand what you're doing as a result, and you can obviously adjust the deck.
Yep. Okay, I'll move on to the next slide. Slide 12.
Sure. This helps in that it tells me it is indeed the developers that are the people who are buying, right? At least today.
Yeah.
And the ideas, and like, of course, in the future, you're going to think about doing this as a marketplace.
Is this a business model? I'd say this is a really weak business model. Pro tip, if you're going to do a business model, make it super clear how much you're charging to who.
On the left here, Jack.
I know, but it's not. I wouldn't call this particularly clear. I'd call this like we're thinking about business models, or we're ideating about multiple different types of business models. Whereas I don't think you should be presenting the full range of all business models. I think for business model slides, keep it really simple. This is what we'll charge right now today. And I think just make it simple. And then if the investors engage, you can talk about, yes, in the future, we'll generate revenue in all these other ways.
Yeah, sure. Or at least have put 60% of the slide by area is on current business model and 40% is on potential future areas of expansion. Maybe think about it that way, or 80-20.
Yeah, but I think some founders get really caught up in this whole thing of, oh, we'll make money in 10 years' time when we can do all these things. And that's a weak business model.
Yeah. For all we know, in five years' time, half the countries around the world will run their own local marketplaces.
Potentially.
And there's not a SaaS intermediary. It's just literally... Okay, competitor slide.
2x2.
I don't mind this. I think this is a good way of showing this information, better than the ticks and crosses. I like this actually in that sense. I think I'm not sure I agree with the positioning here. I feel like the positioning is like, what you're doing here is you're saying we are entering right at the start.
Yeah.
And we're going to own the developers. And by owning the developers, will be able to have the power to control all the people downstream. And whether or not that's going to be right, we'll find out. But I think saying that, because what the carbon accounting firms are saying is we're going to own all the buyers. And as a result of owning all the buyers, we'll be able to demand what all of the developers and everyone else ends up generating in order to put into my box that I need to do my reporting on. And we don't know the answer as to which one is correct, but I think you can argue in either direction.
Yeah, I agree. I don't have so much to add to this one. I would actually, I'd prefer this one to be higher up in the deck in some ways.
Yeah, probably.
Because rather than trying to explain it through an abstract way with 4 slides, I just put this on here, and that helps me get up to speed pretty quickly with the market landscape.
Yeah, and it helps understand where you're fitting in the sort of supply chain of the market.
Okay, slide 14. We've got 2 more slides left.
So this is again where I come back to, okay, so cool, you're saying that there's $1 billion worth of potential market in SaaS purely. But I go, okay, but how much of these 10,000 organizations are we assuming are developers versus investors versus buyers? It doesn't really, I get that there's probably 10,000 of the 3 of them, but what we're saying is the greatest value we're driving is to developers, in which case, how many developers are there and how many do you reasonably expect would be happy to spend 10 grand a month? Because big ones, yeah, sure, absolutely would. But if it's a 4-person operation,
no way they're spending 120K on you.
Yeah.
No way. And I think that goes to the question of whether this is 10,000 is the SOM, TAM, SAM aspect. And that's a bit unclear. I usually just discount whatever they say in terms of the numbers and cut it in half and see if it's still interesting. So this suggests to me that the market is very nascent, very small, still developing. Slide 15, last slide. So I'm going to go first here.
Clear ask.
Yeah, I'm going to say I like this. So this is an ask that's very clear. So I know how much you're raising. I know what you're spending it on. And I know how long you're going to be using it over. The thing that I would only say could be a little bit clearer would be like, what will you achieve? And so right now, the way it's worded is it looks like you're achieving 18 months of runway, but then you're dead. I'm not investing you so you can work for 18 months. I'm investing you so you can create some value. So what I'd love to see is rather than just runways, like to achieve 1,000 customers or something, some number here so I have a sense of the goal.
You want to see the output piece.
Yeah. Because that suggests to me, because I sit there and go, as a pre-seed investor, if I invest, will someone else come in and invest later on, reasonably speaking, if you achieve these goals? Which is always a big question mark for someone like us.
Yeah. No, I agree. I agree, though, in that I like the structure of the quarter by quarter. I like the 3 rows. I really like the presentation of this slide.
Yeah. Okay, great. That is it for CarbonHQ. Hugh, what was your view on that deck?
So I still don't really feel like it really gripped me and told me about what it is that made this team's perspective unique and different. It wasn't like I filled in a lot of those gaps myself in my assumptions of, hey, we're doing this early part of the supply chain and things like I've made a lot of those assumptions, which I think is something you'd probably want to avoid if you can. So I think in terms of that, could probably be some area for improvement. I really like the design. Design was really good. I agree the fundraising ask was really good in terms of what they expected their sort of goals and things like that would look like over that and how they would spend the money. Didn't give me the pie chart piece, but like the pie chart's usually roughly the same. It gave me a clear idea of, okay, this team has thought about how the business is going to progress over the period that they're asking for the funding. And I think that was really great. But yeah, like I think the challenging part here is it maybe doesn't adequately realize and really properly attack the piece of, I've seen a heap of these recently, and so why is it that this one is different and special, and what are you bringing to the business that is different to all the other people bringing the same thing to the business?
Yeah. So my feedback would be, I think I rate this a 7 out of 10. I know you don't like to give ratings. And for those listening, we did have actually now engaged with this company, so we're chatting with them now as a result of this pitch deck and application they sent through to us. Where I would say was really good was a clear ask, and the team seems strong, and you're in a segment that is obviously new and growing. So I love stuff that's in new product categories. I love that. Where I think it was weak was, again, similar to you, not sure what your unique value proposition is, and not sure what you're providing your customers is something super compelling, because selling productivity tools to project developers, I'm going to have a guess, is probably a hard sell. But interested. And so would engage. So on that point, I think it's a good outcome.